Hello everyone, and back for another setup seminar, and do something a little interesting tonight I think. We're at Texas Motor Speedway, and I'm using the A-weather for it's a couple weeks from now. And what we're going to kind of do here is we are going to kind of focus on springs today, and we're going to start with the fixed setup. So I assume we're going to be focusing on springs. What we're going to be kind of doing is I want to kind of demonstrate different spring packages and kind of like the advantages of using big springs, small springs, medium springs, how to get them to work. Just kind of focus on one thing today instead of doing like a broad view to try to help you understanding a little bit more. So first thing we did here is we have the fix setup loaded, and we're just going to make some quick changes on it. We're just going to kind of get it handling a little decent. And then once we accomplish that, we're just going to start kind of focusing just on the front springs and kind of everything else that you need to kind of adjust when you're doing these different spring packages. So right now I'm just going to do some quick changes here. Just going to bring up the tape a little bit, go down to brake bias, and I'm just kind of doing a little quick adjustments here. Since I kind of want to start messing with the springs a lot, I don't really want to take up all the time by going through each adjustment, as we're just trying to get it set up. The handle's decent, so I'm just gonna kind of make some adjustments here. I did a broadcast yesterday with Michael Conti, so I kind of have a good idea of what we kind of need to do to set up to make it a little better. Okay, well, we got those changes done, so just gonna go on the track real fast, make sure it's kind of handles halfway decent here, and then we will one second, take it out for a spin. Yo. Yeah. No, just throw it in the mailbox, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, cool, bye. Don't mind me, just had a phone call real quick. Okay, well, I kind of hit the wall there. It's not a big deal. It's just a little tight here. Just gonna make a few more changes before we really dive into the springs. Okay, that's good enough for what we're going to be doing here. So anyone that kind of just joined us, what we're going to be doing tonight is we're just going to be taking, kind of focusing solely on different spring packages and how to get the car to work with, soft springs, large springs, all kinds of, I call them different packages because when you run a soft spring package, your kind of approach to everything is going to be quite different than running like a large front springs. So I'm just going to quick save this, and we'll get started here. Okay, so right now the springs are 1500, 1650. This is pretty much like a medium spring package here. I wouldn't exactly call these soft. So first thing we're going to start with is we're going to go down. We're going to start with quote-unquote small spring package. And so what I consider small spring package is from like 300 to like 800-ish is kind of like a small spring package range. And I'm just gonna fix these ride heights to put them back where we had them real fast, or close. So when you go from different springs, your kind of goals are gonna be changing, and that's because when you're running a small spring package, what you're kind of trying to do is you're lowering the spring ratio. So when it's like a 400-pound spring, what that means, it takes 400 pounds to compress the spring 1 inch. And like on a race car, what that's going to allow you to do is it's going to allow the front end to be more pliable and compress easier. So like going into a corner, when you have a like 400-pound front spring, it's going to compress the spring easier and faster. So because of that, you have to kind of take a different like approach. You have to run, like, generally speaking, you have to run higher ride heights because of that, or else you're gonna bottom out the car, like in the corner, the splitter level. But there's also advantages to it too. And by advantages, I mean when you run small springs, you also what you kind of do is you let the car travel to the bump stops faster. And when you think of like the spring rate and the bump stops, it can be kind of confusing because especially when you can't visualize any of this stuff. I mean, you can if you go look at a picture or something, but like just in the garage, you really can't. And so, as I explained before, what a bump stop is, it's basically a piece of rubber that sits on the shock shaft. So it kind of acts as another spring, kind of so when the car is traveling downwards, it will eventually reach the bump stop, which will increase basically the spring rate. So what soft springs allow you to do is get it to the bump stop faster, and doing that allows you to control your ride heights in the corners uh, pretty evenly. It's not always about, I mean, that's one of the advantages to it. But a disadvantage to it is it's harder. It's easier for it to bottom out. You have to run higher ride heights, which, because of that, the front end will want to come up off the lift off the corners. You'll lose downforce off the corners. But so that's probably enough of me talking. I'm gonna show you what we need to do to get this to work here. So now, because we decreased the spring rates, we're going to have to compensate here. If we just took the car on the track right now, it's just going to bottom out the front end, and you know, when you do that, it just doesn't turn. You lose your downforce. It wants to understeer up the track. So we're going to have to change our bump stop packers here. Now, what the packers are is they're essentially shims. They are shims that move the bump stop up or down on the shock shaft, and that lets you control how much it travels, how much the front end will travel on it. So now, because we lowered the springs, we need to increase the packer on it, and what we're going to do is go up 2 clicks. Now, you'll probably notice here that our ride heights have gone up. You just take these back down real fast. See, this one is 3.41, that's 3.42. You go up in the packer. This changes to 3.5, 3.49. Now, when that happens, that means that you're already pretty statically in the garage. You are already resting on the bump stop a little bit. It's not, it's the bump stop's not compressing. Maybe it is a little bit, but when you see that number go up, that's basically why it's doing that, is because the car is already resting on the bump stop a little bit. So we're going to go out and try this real fast and see if we got kind of close enough on the shims here. Okay, well, just by judging how the car behaved, we've raised the nose too high. That's you go in the corner and it just kind of wants to spin out like the car has no grip. That's generally because your nose is too high. So instead of going up 2, we're gonna go back down to 1 each here. For me. Okay, now we've made actually a pretty good guess. You know, I say guess, but it's kind of like, you know, an educated guess. But still managed to hit the wall off of 4. But we got it pretty close. So Packer, you don't really want to be using as fine adjustments. Packer kind of just to get you a little close. For fine adjustments, we have to play around with. You can use caster for really fine adjustments. Shocks needs, you know, spring rates themselves. So when I was driving around there, felt like it was still a little high off the track. So what we're gonna do to try to lower it a little bit is we're gonna go down a little bit on the right front spring to try to get it to compress a little sooner. And we're just gonna go down on the bump stop stiffness here. So when I go down on the bump stiffness, what that's allowing to do, it's allowing the shock to compress faster. It's taking resistance away from the shock, and that's going to help us get the splitter down even more. Generally speaking, if you're just trying to do like really fine adjustments here, you can take the bump stop stiffness, and if you're trying to make the front end lower, you can go down with it. If you need to raise it up, go up with the stiffness. Rebound doesn't really work as good, or as well I should say, as the bump stiffness for trying to control it. It's you can do it a little bit, but more rebound, I find at least, that you kind of mess around this more at like bumpier tracks, maybe like Kentucky, to control the attitude going over bumps a little more. So now that we made a little adjustment here, we're going to go back on the track, just see if we have the nose a little more evenly placed across the track here. Okay, so with that adjustment, you've probably seen the split times here that we did lose a little time 1 and 2. It did slightly bottom out the front end, but car was a lot more stable to 3 and 4. And when you have we have an 8 mile per hour wind right here, so that's a compromise that you kind of are gonna have to fight with. You know, you might feel more comfortable with having the car a little have a little more oversteer in it to get through 1 and 2 better, and then kind of just deal with it in 3 and 4. Or you might be more comfortable just kind of making the car go through 3 and 4, you know, pretty good, and deal with the understeer in 1 and 2. And now when we're talking about spring packages, like you guys are probably wondering like what kind of tracks you kind of want to shoot for with what kind of springs. And generally speaking, for the smoother tracks, I go with a lower spring rate. Sorry, I got the backwards. For for the sorry. For the smoother tracks, go with the higher spring rate, and that's because it's going to allow us to get the front end down, and we can really evenly balance the splitter. Meaning that because we have a higher spring rate, we're going to be able to control more easily the splitter level on the track and not have to worry about bumps. Because when you have a bumpy track and you're running a higher spring rate, what ends up happening is the car kind of starts bouncing over the bumps, and you lose, the tire contact, which makes it slower. So, um, and then with the bumpier tracks, I go with the smaller spring rate. That allows the car to kind of go over the bumps a little better while still maintaining a decent splitter level. So now that we have this one decent here, we're just gonna quick save this. And now we're gonna go the opposite way. We're gonna go up and we're gonna run some really big front springs here. Okay, so as you see right now, our ride heights went all kinds of crazy. Maybe went up to 4,000 pound front springs. So the reason your ride heights go all kinds of crazy now is we just had a 400 pound, we had in the left front, 375 right front. And statically, just from the weight of the car, they were being compressed. And from, our spring perch right here. Basically, spring perch adjusts the ride height and it lowers or raises the spring because of it. So when we put a 4,000 pound front spring now, that spring, now it takes 4,000 pounds to compress that spring an inch instead of 400. So that weight that was on there before is compressing it, not nearly as much. The actual spring didn't actually change height. If you took them out of the car and compared like a 4,000 to a 400, they're going to be the same height. But because they're in the car and they're being, compressed by the car and the setup, sway bar, stuff like that, that's what makes them, change ride heights. So we're going to quick fix this and get them where we need them to be. And it actually kind of is a pain to get them back down, but okay, so we got them kind of close. So what I did here is, we just had to basically mess with the spring perch offset, the preload, get back to the cross about where we had it, 57-ish. And now what running these 4,000 pound front springs are going to allow us to do is we're going to be able to set these ride heights statically a lot lower. And what that's going to do is that's going to keep this front splitter lower to the track, down the straightaways, and into the corners. And because now we're running such big springs, we don't have to worry so much about the car compressing going into the corner. It's got a lot more resistance now when you're going to be rolling it to the corner, and it's not going to be compressing near as much. So that allows us to run ride heights on the track that are going to be much closer to the track. So that's going to help us with overall downforce of the car, and it's going to reduce drag down the straightaways. That's one of the advantages of running the bigger springs here compared to the softer springs. So now because we have our softer springs here, we can run less packer as well. When because we have higher springs, we can bring the packer down. That's going to allow us, that's basically going to lower the bump stop. And when you're working with something like this and you're going like a big change like this, you're going to have to just take kind of some educated guesses and just kind of try it out. And I'll probably miss the first time, and we'll probably have to make some few adjustments, but we'll just give it a whirl over here. Well, it actually wasn't too bad of a guess, but it is biting him out a little bit. Specifically the left front, I feel. So we're gonna have to make a few adjustments here. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go back up on the packer a little bit in the left front, just see if it's a little better. And if it, we feel it's kind of close, then we can start doing some little fine tuning to try to get it, a little better. Okay, and that was, much better adjustment there. We have it a lot closer now. So now we can just mess around with the springs a little bit and hopefully get it pretty good here. So we're just gonna go up a little bit. It's still bottoming out a little bit on the left front, and a little bit on the right front too, but more so on the left front. So we can go up on a little bit on the spring rate. Now when you have huge springs in here, like going up 200 pounds really isn't much. So I mean, you can make bigger adjustments when you have bigger springs in here, and that's what's if you go up 100, 200 pounds, it's probably not going to really do all that much. But we're going to do something else here too. we're also going to go up 200 pounds on the right front. Now, we're going to try something interesting here. So we're going to go down on the front sway bar size a little bit. We're going to 2.65 here. Now what that's going to do is with the smaller sway bar, it is going to, when you're in the corners, it's not, the big sway bar isn't going to hold the left front down as much. It's going to let it pick up a little bit, or not really pick up, but it's going to basically decrease or increase the left front ride height in the corners. It's going to let it move a little bit more, so hopefully that helps us with it bottoming out. That was a little better in the left front. Right front's a little too high now, but we got a question: why not just take out bar asymmetry? And the reason for that is because when you do take out arm symmetry, it's kind of a bigger adjustment than what we're trying to go for here. If you're having major issues with it, you can do that. Like if if we're trying to run like a ton, let's say for some reason we have a ton of preload in here and we're having issues with left front bottoming out, then we can start messing with bar asymmetry to try to fix that. Because it's not like a huge adjustment, we can just change some springs and get what we need. It's easier to just kind of mess with a little bit with the springs and packers a little bit to accomplish our goals. When you start messing with the arm asymmetry, it's really throwing everything kind of ride height wise out of whack. So I really only suggest doing that if you're like really having troubles with splitter level, meaning that like one side's all the way up in the air, one side's like bottoming out on the track. And that was definitely a better adjustment there, going back down on it. And this is, right there before I, made a mistake, which is really easy to do, making setups. When I was out on the track, I was bottoming out the left front, and I thought it was bottoming out the right front as well, not just the left front. So turns out that I did make a mistake though, and we had to actually go down on the right front. to level out the splitter a little bit. I'm actually going to go down just a little bit in the bump stiffness here, and just a little bit on the left front spring to try to level out the splitter just a little more. Well, I feel the splitter height's pretty actually level here. We're just facing a couple problems that arises when we're running out like a higher front spring package, and the setup compared to the smaller front spring package is getting to the corners a lot better. But specifically in turn 1 and 2, you guys can probably see with the split times that I'm losing time in the center of the corner. The car isn't rotating as good down the track. And that's for a few reasons. It's got, with the bigger front springs down there, it's actually pretty bumpy down in Texas down there, and it's having a little hard time getting over the bumps. So I'm just gonna go up on the right rear track bar a little bit and go down left rear spring just to try to free it up a little bit. Went a little too big of an adjustment to free it up. Probably just put the spring back in. Should be pretty good then. Maybe take a little bit of the track bar out. But it got through center of 1 and 2 much better. And this is one of the problems too when you're, because we're running such high front springs here, it's still not going through 1 and 2 with the bumps in the bottom. The front end kind of just wants to skip up a little bit, and we're having to compensate to get the car to rotate over the bumps. 4,000 springs is probably high for here. Ideally, you'd probably 2,000 pounds is probably more or less where you want to be, because you're kind of compromising 3 and 4, and 1, 2, and 3 and 4. Because 3 and 4 is actually pretty smooth. So, you know, a compromise of 2,000 pound front springs is probably going to be, you know, kind of where the sweet spot might be. So I've had a couple questions about the bump stop stiffness, and it's kind of interesting thing. So basically, what the bump stop stiffness is a bump stop is the piece of rubber that goes on the shock shaft. Then when that's compressing, it hits that piece of rubber, and it acts basically as a progressive spring, meaning as it compresses, the spring rate gets higher. So when you change the stiffness of it, what you're changing is how stiff that piece of rubber is, and you're increasing the spring rate of that rubber, essentially. Now, it is a pretty big adjustment, meaning when you go up to like 2, so hold on, we'll just kind of put this on the bump stop. Okay, so 2.49 is in the garage is the ride height where the bump stop is resting, the shock is resting on the bump stop. So you go up to 2, it changes to 2.62. That's how big of an adjustment that is. That's quite big. So what that's doing is it's kind of hard. I can't really put a number to it because we don't know the spring rate for the bump stops themselves. Generally speaking, I never really run over a 3. Most places 1 or 2 bump stop stiffness. I run a 3 a couple times, but not very often. It's kind of you know, and you can use that basically as another kind of a way to get the front end where you need it. And you know, if you're having a hard time getting the front end even, what you can do is you can try, you know, going up on the bump stop, and then trying to redo the front end to get it, you know, see if you can get it more even that way. That's pretty much what I use it for. Generally speaking, though, I like to keep them kind of as soft as possible, because I mean they're not, you know, they're not a linear spring rate. So the more they compress, you know, the more the spring rate goes up on them. So when you put them from like a 1 to 2, you're increasing that an unknown amount, but it's going to be, you know, quite higher. It's like taking a spring from like a 400-pound spring to like an 800-pound spring. Is about the best way I can kind of describe that. But if anyone has any, you know, questions, just, you know, let me know in the chat. I'll get to them. I know it's probably a lot to take in, the springs. I'm trying to make it as kind of interesting and easy as possible, but I'm actually kind of sick today again and took some flu stuff. But like going back, like tracks like say Kentucky, which is a really bumpy track. Um, it's actually kind of a really hard place to kind of pick out a, you know, spring package for, because with the bumps they're so, you know, they're so violent there that, you actually can't go too low with the springs. You kind of have to go in between, and you're sacrificing, how much, you want the car to bottom out and give up speed, to be level in the corners, because like going down the front straightaway, it's very bumpy, and the more you bottom out down the straightaway, the more straightaway speed you're actually losing. A good example of that is like Pocono. If you go to Pocono and you take a setup that really bottoms out going down the front straightaway, and you compare the straightaway speeds to something that doesn't, you'll notice a couple miles per hour, at the end of the front straightaway difference. But I think that's where I'm gonna end it here tonight. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Any questions, post them in the forums, and I'll try to get to them. Yesterday I did a video with Michael Conti. It's pretty interesting. If you guys want to check it out, maybe I'll do another one later this week. Guys, let me know kind of like what you're having a hard time with. What do you want me to do the video on? I'll I kind of want to start doing more things. I kind of went over like setup, just generally speaking how to do it, and today we did kind of went over springs and stuff. So kind of want to start going over like maybe more specific areas, but just let me know, and hope you guys have a great night, good evening, whatever. And if you want, subscribe. Let you know I'm going live, and talk to you guys later. Peace.